Alright everyone, today's video is on better improv. And I'm making this because I know while we should, as DMs, strive to prep for our games and prep adequately and be very thorough with it, sometimes we just don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we just can't, for whatever reason, we can't that week or that day or whatever session, we are unable to prep for it. And of course, in session, even if we have preps, players go off the rails often. So this is, I think, a very critical video on how to do better improv. And the first question you got to ask yourself is, when should I improv? Well, you're going to improv the whole time, but the really big times are when your players go off the rails, or if you run out of content, like if they go way faster than you expect and you need to throw something at them fast before they get bored and don't have fun, or if you just need some more spice. If you just you're going through this dungeon, you're like, well, this feels kind of monotonous. I'm gonna throw in a puzzle here, I'm gonna throw in a riddle there, something along those lines. If you need a little more spice, that's when you should throw in some improv. All right. Additionally, if they start talking to random NPCs, this goes back into some of my other videos on world building. You should always have I think you should always have quite a few names just on hand, because that's one of the hardest parts for me anyways. That's one of the hardest parts, and I think a lot of people have a consensus on this. One of the hardest parts to improv is making the names. So again, if you have a language for your city and you have some, I don't know, redone names, I guess you could say, like from Miller to Millhouse and I forgot, like Smith to Hammerhand. I have a video on this. I think it's city building 1 or 2, but there's some good points in there. But you should have a bunch of names for when they start talking to random NPCs. That's one thing that you should have to make your games easier. But let's say that my players go off the rails. All right, I have them here. I want them to go here, right? But they instead go that way. Okay, so what do? Well, I gotta know the qualities of here, right? What's here? Well, let's say it's the castle of a fallen kingdom, and there's goblins there now, right? And they patrol the whole area. So one way to handle my players going off the rails is to get them back on track. So they encounter a goblin patrol here, because remember, you control a thing that happens, right? You can tell the players to come and roll for an encounter. They find goblins. Oh, there's goblins this way. Okay. And goblins are like cat for players. They're going to want to slaughter every one of those boys. So that's one way to go about, is to get them back on the rails. Another way is to move the castle. So I have them here. I wanted them to go here. I can just move the castle, right? That's another way. And the third way is to just throw out some random stuff there. And this is what goes into my next one, is reusing assets. So whenever I DM, I remember basically everything that I do. I don't know if anyone else is like this, but every castle they run through, every dungeon they hit, every shopkeep they encounter, every NPC they rob and murder, I remember everything. And then I can really easily just throw that back into my game. And even the same thing with monsters to a certain extent, right? Because I don't remember stat blocks off the top of my head, so I'd have to take my time and write out the core for, which you should be able to do that in about 15 seconds, right? Write down a monster stat block, unless it's like a harder one, but I think like a minute at most for a monster. And a fun challenge for DMs, give yourself like 20 monster concepts to flesh out, and then just do it as fast as you can. It's pretty fun. It's actually surprisingly fun. Just do the core 4, of course. So armor class, hit points, attack, and damage. And then if it's like a boss monster or something like that, you give it some legendary actions, reactions, a few abilities, attributes, that sort of thing. But it's a pretty fun challenge to just make the monsters as fast as you can and see how well they turn out afterwards. Okay, so if they go off the rails, those are the ways to get them back on track, right? So if they go too fast, then you can, of course, throw out some extra content. You could say, okay, well, I feel like we got to end the session early tonight, boys. I got early day tomorrow, something like that. You can end the session, of course, but if you don't want to do that, throw out some old assets that you used, right? Or if you need some more spice. So if the dungeon's feeling a little monotonous, you're like, oh, another combat. Okay, oh, another combat. All right. They might be having fun, but they might not. And at this point, it would behoove you to throw in a puzzle, throw in a riddle, throw in something along those lines. I've used the same riddle about stars from the Sunless Citadel like 8 times, and my players have loved it every time. Of course, not the same party, but the players don't know. No one's really going to be able to call you on it, and they're going to like it. So what's the problem with doing that, with reusing that asset? All right, so some... I guess the next point would be to make the monsters fast. And I'll go over a quick guide on making monsters faster, because I actually covered all my points faster than I thought I would. So I guess I'm in easy mode right now. I don't know. But making monsters fast. So I think the best way to make a monster fast is not to consider how you need it to be for balance. I think the best way is to pick a balanced monster first. So let's say I wanted to throw my players up against skeletal warriors, but these are the skeletons of knights, right? So logically, a skeleton has 13 armor class, right? 13 armor class, 13 hit points, plus 4 to hit for 5 damage, I think, something like that. So I would say, well, these skeletons perhaps are still wearing their plate mail. Perhaps they have an armor class of 18 rather than 13, or maybe since they've been dead so long, or since they're dead they can't use it quite so well, maybe the armor class is lower, like 16 or 15. But still, I think maybe they probably have a higher armor class than 15. Maybe they have a higher chance to hit higher damage than just 4 and 5 because they are former knights, so maybe they have a chance to hit of 6 because level 1 players have a chance to hit of 6, or maybe even 8, and they deal perhaps 10 damage a strike, which is pretty reasonable considering if you look at player character levels, that's about the averages there. So, I think that if you look at it logically, it's pretty simple to make them, and then if you really have to, tweak them a little bit. Here's some of my rules of thumb. Hit way harder than you need to. And that sounds bad. Just hit harder than you need to. Don't make it like overwhelming strike, but hit harder than you need to for a lot of the combat. You're like, okay, these guys are about to die. They're about to get clapped. Pull back, right? If you start soft and then go hard out of nowhere, that's going to feel bad to your players. But if you start hitting hard and then you go down, your players aren't going to feel bad. They're not going to suspect anything. And never, ever, 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 never, ever in 1,000 years tell your players that you fudged rolls, that you have misbalanced things, that you're trying not to TPK. Never do that ever. I can't even articulate with words how awful that is. And on the same coin, on the other side of the coin, show your integrity as a DM if you feel like it. It's just a bonus here. It's not mandatory. But I will prove to my players, through whatever means I want, that they don't have plot armor, that I don't fudge rolls, and whatever other things I think the DM might do. I prove that to them, and then when I do have to do it, they don't suspect anything. Because let's be honest, all of us have to do it at times. I mean, we don't have to. Someone like Monty Martin, a god of DMing, he doesn't have to do it because he makes all his rules in the open anyways. So, but if you want them to be a little more trusting of you, if you want them to think the stakes are more real, let them see your DM integrity. And it's like Gary Gygax said, they should feel they have a 30% chance of success, and then actually have like a 70%, but they should feel like they're in a tough situation while they're likely in an okay situation, right? Okay, so a pro tip before I go, because this video is getting kind of long. If you know your world, your improv is going to be so much easier. So let's say I'm on the island of Haven of Skulls, okay? And I need to get my players to the castle of Old Illyria. And I'm making all this up right now, by the way, because I know my world so well, I can do this. So I'm on Skaven Holes, I need Haven of Skulls. Then you get my players to Castle Illyria, they go off the rails, I send the goblins, that doesn't work again. They find a hidden message with writing they can't understand, they take it to the harbor master, he says, oh yeah, I think I know this script, it's Draconic, from maybe perhaps the old Illyrian Empire, and then along the way, they see murals with dragons on it, anything like that, right? So if you know your world, the improv is so much easier, because I know my world, my homebrew world 7 stars, I know it well enough to make that up on the spot, and you can do it too. If you just know your world, it makes everything so much easier. So I want you to comment down below about what you do to make your improv easier. I want you to go to my Discord and talk about it there. If you're in the Discord and you ask me, I'll make you a monster just for fun to prove how easy it is. Yeah, I want you to share and subscribe so that everyone can see these videos. And then goodbye, good luck, and have fun in your games.